welcome to Good People, Good Things, a podcast all about putting the spotlight on the special people who do good, fun, and creative things with a desire to make a positive impact on the well-being of individuals and communities at large. This series is brought to you with a mixture of French and, I'm told, South African accent. I am Flo, your host and a yoga teacher by trade. Let me introduce you to Simon Oliver. Simon is born and spent his childhood in the 70s, 80s in Middlesborough on Teesside, in the northeast of England, alongside his identical twin brother. At the time, the region, which was a major steel and chemicals industry centre, was going through a massive industrial decline. Unemployment was high and prospects were grim. So it comes to no surprise that Simon's parents encouraged him to study hard, which he obediently did, and brilliantly so. Simon won himself an open scholarship to Keble College in Oxford and studied law. In 1988, he became a lawyer in the City of London, where he would go on working for over 30 years, of which 20 years full-time. Simon's life changed when he started to work part-time and took on a volunteering role at the Royal Hospital for Neuro-disability in Putney as a befriender. He later became involved in the Hospice world, where he fulfilled various roles. These experiences led him to eventually decide that law had to go. Today, Simon works as a facilitator in the day hospice at St. Raphael's and is contributing to making a difference in the life of many families and individuals. Simon, a big thank you for being my guest on Good People, Good Things today.
It's lovely to join you.
So before I start asking you more legit questions, because your name is Simon Oliver, and since people you never know might be wondering, are you related to Jamie Oliver?
I'm not, unfortunately, no. So I don't get the share of his wealth or his culinary skills. No, not as far as I know, anyway. Yeah.
Well, that's that clear, just in case. And then I have another silly question to ask you. You have an identical twin brother.
I do.
Which was actually one of my... when I was little, I was obsessed with it because I found it fascinating. I just thought of all the cool stuff we could have done if I had a twin sister, like all the pranks. So did you do any of that, like kind of pretending to be each other and driving your teachers crazy?
My parents unfortunately could always tell the difference, even though we looked very alike. At school, they were useless. They had no idea. So we did used to occasionally kind of get each other into trouble a little bit. But actually in secondary school, they picked up on it. So we had a school uniform where you had to wear a white shirt or a grey shirt. And they forced a rule, so I had to wear a white shirt and he had to wear a grey shirt. So it was difficult to kind of, they soon rumbled it. It was difficult to get away with, yeah.
But it took them a little while to figure things out.
Yeah, no,
if you were ready. So you made the most of it while you could.
Yes.
So, yeah. So more serious questions now. You worked as a corporate lawyer in London for 30 years. And today you're a facilitator at the St. Raphael's Hospice in Merton. Could you describe really the, I'm going to say, internal journey that progressively took you away from being a lawyer to what you're doing now? What motivated such a drastic change?
Yeah, I think in order to sort of answer that, I really need to very briefly explain why I became a lawyer, I think, because actually that was a mistake, I think, with the benefit of hindsight. I should never have had to travel this journey. I should have been at the destination at the start. I became a lawyer because of my background, really, where I grew up, and I had very pushy academic parents that were very concerned, not about ego and status, but about being comfortable and having a job, you know, being secure. That was the big thing growing up on Teesside in the 80s. You had to get a job. So when I wanted to go to university, they said, you're going to have to do a vocational degree. You're going to come out of university and get a job. You're not going to do history. You're not going to do English. You're not going to do anything lovely. You've got to do law. So I did. And then you're in this sort of weird sausage machine. That's the best way to describe it. You start at university doing law and you leave university and you've got a job. And then suddenly you're in that job and you're in it for, in my case, 30 years. So yeah, that's how I sort of ended up there in the wrong thing. I always knew it was not for me. I'm a bit of a nerd, so I like the academic challenge. I quite like the difficult, nubby questions to solve. I hated dealing with clients, not because I hate dealing with people, but because of who those people were. They were in a very competitive commercial environment. It was dog eat dog. It was survival of the fittest, whichever cliche you want to use, whichever Darwinian example you want to use. And it was aggressive and competitive and difficult, and I didn't like it. And then this opportunity came up, And it's weird, actually. It was a lady that was coming back from maternity leave and wanted to come back part-time. So a job share came up. And I thought, yeah, I'll do that. I've worked this long. I can just about survive on my salary. So I kind of agreed to do a job share. So we split. I did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. She did Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which meant that I had at least 2 days spare. And maybe it's a Protestant work ethic thing, but I couldn't just lie down and do nothing when I had 2 days spare, unfortunately. So I thought, well, what can I do? And I saw a sign at the Royal Hospital for Neuro-disability advertising for volunteers. So I did that, and I ended up doing it for 10 years on the Thursday and some Fridays, just basically befriending one of the patients that was there who had very advanced cognitive needs, was in a wheelchair. We played computer games, we did gardening, and I loved it. And I did that 2 days a week and thought, why am I doing the other 3 days a week? So I thought, right, I need to make a job of this. And then I wrote to lots of different healthcare providers. So I wrote to the Hospital for Neuro-disability, I wrote to hospices and hospitals and said, can I have a job? And I don't want to be academic. I don't want to be in an office. I don't want to be at a computer. I want to do something real, practical. The only people that responded were actually the Marie Curie Hospice in Hampstead, who said, would you like to be a healthcare assistant 1 day a week? So not even knowing what that was, I thought, yeah, how hard can that be?
That's so brave.
And so I used to go every Saturday for 2 years. I used to work as a healthcare assistant in the Hampstead Hospice. And I don't know whether you know what a healthcare assistant does. It's not a nurse. It's not medical. It's purely practical stuff. So you feed the patients, you dress the patients, you shower the patients, you chat to the patients. It's phenomenally physically exhausting. The shifts, because of the way that healthcare works, never quite understood why. The shifts are about 12 hours long. And of those 12 hours, you'd be mad busy, like too busy for about half of it, and then bored the rest of it. So that's kind of tiring as well in its own way. So after a while of doing that, I just thought it's too tiring. And then COVID happened.
It's not sustainable. Yeah,
No,
I mean,
yeah,
like also like you came into it in your, in later years. I mean, it would be physical for someone
yeah.
younger,
I
but
mean,
when you're like in your 40s, or it's
yeah.
just like,
I have enormous admiration for I used to work with a lot of very small, tiny little Filipino ladies that were all in their 60s, and they were amazing. I don't know where they get their energy and their kind of motivation from, but I'd be kind of panting and sighing and groaning, 30 years younger than them and a little bit taller, not much taller, but and I was just so impressed by that. But I recognized that I would burn out if I did that. And then COVID happened, which meant that the little residual law job that I had left went, and I wasn't sad about that at all. It was, they said, "Oh, we might have to make you redundant," and I went, "Good."
thank you.
When can I stop? Uh,
Now,
and but would you like to work your notice period? No, no, I don't. And then so I had this extra time, and I thought, well, I can't be a full-time healthcare assistant because I'll expire. And then I did a bit of volunteering at St. Raphael's during COVID. I should explain, it's the local hospice to where my brother lives, and I moved in with my brother during COVID. So it's kind of Merton, Cheam, Sutton, South London. And I just worked on reception because that's, they needed somebody on reception. They had to stand down a lot of the volunteers for risk assessment reasons because they were elderly. And so they failed the risk assessment. So because I'm not quite so elderly, I was stood in. And I did that, and I quite enjoyed it. It's a bit boring being on reception. You don't have much interaction with patients, but you do see their families. And then a job came up in the wellbeing centre, and I thought, yay, this is the universe, if you believe all that nonsense, telling me that this is a role. So then I started that about 18 months ago.
yeah, quite
Yeah.
recent.
And now I'm here now. Yeah. Now I've just upped my days from 3 days to 4 days, spread over 5, if you see what I mean. Because I'm trying to engage with a new project that they're doing here about neighbours, so visiting sick and dying people in their homes. Yeah. So I'm trying to expand that. So it's a developing role, and it pays buttons.
That's a
And
huge adjustment from like being in the city corporate lawyer
yeah,
to like progressively changing your career and your life.
it's not just the practical day-to-day life that changes in terms of work.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like your
it's absolutely
lifestyle is
true.
completely be turned on its head.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, as I've sort of probably bored you too much with, I didn't enjoy my job in the law. There was so much that was unrewarding in it. But one of the rewarding things was they paid you well. I mean, they did pay you very well, which is actually why I'm able to do now what I do, because, I was able to buy my flat and whatever. Uh, and what I used to do, which I think is extremely common, is that you compensate yourself
Yes, true.
for the miserable job by eating in nice restaurants, by going to the theatre a lot, by having lovely holidays. And that's great. I love that. It's fantastic. But it is a compensation for the miserable job. When you get rid of the miserable job, you don't need to compensate as much. And it's just as well because you can't, because the money isn't there. It just so when you go to a restaurant and they say it's £25 for a pizza, you're thinking, I'm sorry, what? It's you kind of I like to see it as maybe I've done too much yoga. I see it as a lovely mindful challenge. Now I look at the prices of things
Yes.
in a way that I never did, and I think, do I need to spend that? Is it going to make that kind of difference to my life? And you usually conclude it doesn't.
But it's also like I mean, I think lots of people do like really resenting the fact that every healthcare professionals, their work is one of the most important, teachers, etc. And it's almost, yeah, but if you like your job, then you get to be
Mm,
paid less, and it's just such rubbish.
mm,
Why can't you have both? I mean, it's literally some of the most important job in any country.
yeah.
And I feel sometimes there's like, because these people are driven by passion like you, it's almost like a license to just underpay, because let's be realistic, like
Mm,
you are underpaid like so many people, and it's, you should still be able to do these little outings. Yeah, maybe you wouldn't go to exactly the same venues to eat out as when you were a lawyer, but I think it should be part of the lifestyle that, yeah, you can still go out a little bit and enjoy a play and do those things.
yeah.
So
And that's
that's my rant right there.
no, it's absolutely spot on because frankly, if the government society, I suppose, not just a government society, relies upon the vocation of teachers and healthcare professionals. If they paid lawyers what they pay healthcare professionals, people wouldn't do law. But because people want to do the job that I do, or some people do, they'll do it anyway. They might moan a little bit about it. They might go on strike every now and then, but ultimately, they'll
Yeah,
still do the job. Yeah.
yeah. But basically, like you sort of went back now in a way, like to interact with people the way you started to do when you were a befriender. You mentioned the name of this lady you were a befriended to, and her name is,
Oh yeah, Georgina.
so I mean, you were a friend with her for a very long time. It's about a decade,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, Georgina is a. When I first met Georgina, and they were very good at the hospital. They said, "We don't tell you what's wrong with the patients because actually, it's none of your business, really. In that sense, if she
Yeah.
wants to tell you what's wrong with her, she'll tell you. But she has the kind of cognition of a sort of 6-year-old. I'm not very good with kids. You'd have a better idea, Flo, what a 6-year-old is like.
Like my
Uh, the
daughter, yes. No, no.
Yeah, which has its pros and it has its cons. Do you know what I
Absolutely.
mean? 6-year-olds can be phenomenally rewarding, and Georgina was phenomenally rewarding, but you caught her in a bad mood. Oh, she was in a bad mood, and let's put it like, she didn't have a 6-year-old's vocabulary. She had an adult vocabulary, and my objective when I used to go there on a Thursday morning, and I could be hungover, and I could be grumpy, and I could be tired, it was just to sort of make Georgina feel better at the end of the day than she did at the beginning.
Hmm.
And she always made me feel better, and I always made her feel better, and we had a real laugh. We did literally just laugh and laugh the whole time. We used to play computer games, which makes it sound like we were doing, I don't know, Call of Duty or something. We were playing solitaire, and
Ah,
I was
nice.
teaching her the rules every week for 10 years because she
Ah,
couldn't remember them.
oh,
But
bless.
we used to laugh about that. So yeah, she was my friend, and without being too maudlin about it, because I don't want to bring the tone down. But she died during lockdown. She didn't die of COVID. She died of her underlying conditions, but she died during lockdown. So I watched her funeral on a camera
Oh,
on television, and I saw she had two sisters. Her mother couldn't go because her mother was not very well. She was, what do they call it? Vulnerable. Uh, So she had one sister sitting on one aisle and one sister sitting on the other aisle, and we just watched on the screen, and that was shit.
That's
It was
so
just
hard.
really, really terrible. And because of the way that my jobs have now progressed, I don't volunteer there anymore, and I don't think I could. I don't think I could go back without Georgina, really.
Yeah.
I was her friend, and other people can do other things there, and they do, I'm sure, marvelous things, but I used to go and visit Georgina. Yeah.
Yeah, some places you can't go back once the person is not there anymore. It's been so hard during COVID. Like lots of people had to say their goodbyes like that. Like it's something, but it's still like it's already such a surrealistic experience when you lose a loved one, and when it's like that, like you're not even physically present in the same space. It's even more surreal, and it's even harder, I think, to grieve. So you never met.
Sorry.
You never met any of the family members of Georgina?
I did meet them over the years, so I'm still
Okay.
in touch with her mum by email and what have you. So I did know who they were, so I was in contact with them. The interesting, it's not a difficulty, but I suppose it is a difficulty in one sense with my relationship with Georgina, is that Georgina couldn't tell me details about what her parents did or where they worked or where they lived, because she was little and daft. Do you know what I mean? In the best possible way. She wanted to talk about solitaire and about how many pots we could break in the garden. She didn't want to say what her dad did for a living or where they lived. So my understanding of her family came from meeting her family, not from Georgina, which was nice. Yeah.
They must have been very grateful to have you there, become her friend. That's such a.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I hope, I don't know why I do the things that I do, but I don't do it for a slap on the back. I don't do it for that reason, because doesn't last very long. I do it because it makes me feel better.
Yeah, of course. But it's like, for me,
basic.
Yeah, I think because of the age, of course, I am, and you are. Like, it's really nice to know that there will be someone like you to provide this amazing friendship and support to a parent. It's just it's very, very special, because in all the years it's hard to make friends. It's hard. You
No,
have
it
less
is, yeah.
opportunities, and it's such a great initiative, and you fulfill that role like beyond, I'm sure, expectations. But so because you change your world completely, when it came to being a health assistant, I guess did you have any prior training to kind of like prepare you for what you were going to deal with, or you had to shadow someone for a while, or when you were in Hampstead, how did that work?
Yeah, in Hampstead, I was surprised. This isn't a dig at Marie Curie, by the way, because they're marvelous. But I was surprised by how little training I got. So I turned up on the first day, and I shadowed a couple of healthcare assistants for a day, I think it was, or maybe 2 days. Maybe it was Saturday and Sunday. And then that was it. That was like, get on with it, sort of thing. And I thought, wow. Now, a lot of the tasks that you do as a healthcare assistant are sort of routine, practical tasks. So you'll make somebody their lunch, like I'm 56, I can make a sandwich. Do you know what I mean? So I can do that. But I was surprised by how, because I think when you work in a healthcare setting, you forget how alien that healthcare setting is to other people. So when I arrived to be a healthcare assistant, they'd just say, go into the scrub and get me the pill containers. What are you talking about? I've got no idea
Yes.
what this is, the vocabulary I don't understand. And the whole kind of PPE thing, which we've all got extremely used to, actually, thanks to COVID. But they used to do that. They've always done that in healthcare settings, and you don't remember that until you're halfway through washing a patient and realize you haven't got gloves on, and then think, oh. So things like that, which actually the training, in a sense, maybe they know what they're doing better than I give them credit for, is experiential. You have to do it. You can sit in a classroom and they can tell you how to change a patient or move a patient or feed a patient, but until you've actually done it with somebody else, because that's the very good thing about most, certainly my experience in the hospices, is you don't work alone. You work with other people, usually with a nurse if you're an assistant, or certainly with another healthcare assistant. So if one of you doesn't know what you're doing, you kind of hope the other one does, and between you muddle through, and you kind of support each other in that way as well, because it is quite sort of, intense. Yeah.
It is intense. How do you cope, like, with the, I guess now, I mean, still as a facilitator, I'm sure you encounter other kinds challenges. But when it's so physical like this, you feed, you wash, you see people die. You have what keeps you afloat? How do you look after yourself? Is there anything in place within the hospice to support the staff at the beginning, at least?
Yes,
when
they
it's
do.
so
They do
new
have their. Well, there's sort of two aspects to it. There's the lip service, which all kind of employers and institutions will provide, where they say that they provide support. That's have some value, but limited. The actual support is from your colleagues and from the environment that you work in. And they have put in place things. There's a thing called Schwartz rounds, which are sort of informal. It's like a discussion group. It's like a sort of counselling session that you have. Depending on where you work, it's a regular occurrence. Sometimes they have it every week, sometimes they have it every month. And literally you kind of vent and you rant and you bring up stuff, not necessarily with a view to it being resolved, but just to get it off your chest. So there's all of that support. I actually think it's a temperamental thing. I think some people are able to do it. And this isn't an ego thing. It's not saying I'm marvelous because I can do it. It's almost the opposite, really. I'm insensitive and therefore I'm able to do it. I don't get terrifically emotional when dealing with people because I just sort of think I always have a sort of practical approach to it. How can we sort this out? Even when dealing with bereavement, it's kind of we're very direct, we're very straightforward, the language we use is completely, straightforward. We don't talk about passing away or leaving the room or going to sleep. It's death. And we're very direct about it. And I like that. I like to think, right, how can we make things better? I can't solve it. I can't make you not lonely anymore. I can't bring the person back, but I can give practical assistance. I can listen. I can talk. I can certainly talk. And that helps. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like personally, like, do you have, I mean, you're a yoga practitioner. Do you find like like movement helps you as well? Like just like clear your head or just put things in perspective?
No, I definitely, it very definitely does. Now, I don't know whether I went into healthcare because I do yoga or whether I do yoga because I'm the sort of person that went into healthcare. It's a sort of chicken and egg, but I do think the two are compatible and sustaining because it's about sort of priorities, it's about perspective, it's about what's important, what's not important, and ultimately what's important is looking after yourself and others. And yoga is about that. It's not, I've practiced with you for years, Fleur, and your practice is very strong, but it's not competitive. It's not about get into this posture, get out of that posture. Have a go, try and do it, but not round of applause, you're marvelous because you can. It's more well done for trying. And I think that's what I get from the yoga, really. So the movement does help. I spend a lot of time on my feet at work, so my practice is probably lazier than it was. I like a yin practice now. I like lying still. Being forced to lie still, I like. If I'm just have the spare time, I'll find that I'm doing a job. But if I've got an hour's practice of doing whatever, then I've got to do it. So yeah, I find that really useful. Yeah.
And I guess you would have, I mean, in yoga, and maybe other places as well, I'm not just saying there's just yoga, but you think about death, you do not in a morbid way, but it's a subject that is brought into the room because you do your relaxation. It's called Shavasana, it's corpse pose. So somehow, and I remember the first time I was like, whoa, that's direct, but it's like, it is beautiful because it is part of life, and it's just something we're going to have to deal with more or less directly. Often it feels very remote. We don't want to talk about it. And it's the same thing with the elderly. The elderly are not really given a voice. You don't see them. And maybe because for a lot of us, it feels like, oh, that's just the room before you enter death. And maybe that's why we don't want to see them unless they're super cool and trendy. There are a few that you can see, but they tend to be, like very atypical. They can be seen if they're healthy, but you don't want to see them if there's problems. But so what do you think drew you specifically, to work with the elderly?
I don't know really. I've always found them interesting, in a really kind of. I like people that have lived, and I like actually one of the good things about working in a hospice after law, without returning too much to that, is law is a real tiny little bubble of posh people that have had very particular experiences in life. You're in a hospice, you can get a lawyer that comes in that's dying, or you can get a bin man that comes in and dying. And I'm as interested in both of them, and I like the way they talk, and I like their life experiences. I like, I was a bit of a history boy. I would like to have done that at university. As you'll have gathered from this, I talk a lot. So I like conversation. So, and I get more of that from the elderly. I find younger people a bit, I don't care what they think because they don't know anything,
If anyone in their 20s
Come-
listening to this, we're still like you, really. But yeah.
No, I do really, but I like them for different. I love the naivety of the young. I like that. I like the optimism. I like the excitement. I like it is naivety, but I also like the kind of knowing, kind of experiential experience of the elderly, and they can sort of smile wryly and say, "Well, yeah, and of course you would think that, but you wait and see." And I quite like that. Certainly in the hospice, and I think it's probably generally with older people or the elderly, there's a sort of authenticity about it. There's a sort of lack of pretense and affectation. If somebody has had a terminal diagnosis, actually, it doesn't matter what age they are, they stop pretending to like things they don't like. They stop pretending to do things they don't want to do. They'll just be, time's limited. I'm doing this. Shut up, And I like that. I like it when the mask drops and people are just kind of real. And they can be horrible. That's not to say that they, I don't want to portray this sort of marvelous picture of, elderly and angelic kind of people. Even horrible people get cancer. Do you know what I mean? It brings out the worst in people and it brings out the best in people. But what it does is it tends to bring out the real kind of personality that's lurking in
Yeah,
there.
there's no bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. There's no time for bullshit. I haven't the energy. I don't care what you think. Sod you.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Maybe it's because I've worked in jobs and things where you weren't allowed to be like.
Yeah, you have to
but
use a
now it's quite
specific
nice.
language and it's very flourished and stuff. But I think for me, it's something I have with my husband as well. I don't know if it's cultural. I think in some cultures are a bit more direct than others. And there's something that I would get sometimes that I would say stuff. It was not rude, but it was just a little bit too direct for the British environment I was in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we have this kind of veneer of respectability, and if you're a native and we've been brought up and you're in your 50s, you can sort of sense what people actually mean, but you do have to kind of perceive it. Whereas actually, I kind of like a directness. Really, I like you to say what you mean and mean what you say. That kind of thing.
Yeah, you was what you're saying.
Yeah.
You talk the talk, you walk the walk, or vice versa.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I always get things mixed up, Could you tell us a little bit more about? You mentioned the pandemic earlier. How did you adapt to the pandemic conditions, and how was it? I mean, your patients, I guess, were very isolated during that time as well.
Yeah, no, it was extremely difficult. At the start of the pandemic, back in whenever it was, 2020, I was still a lawyer, so I wasn't really involved in the hospice too much. When I joined the hospice, and then when I joined the wellbeing centre here at St Raphael's, we used to try and facilitate our sessions. Just to explain, we have sort of morning and afternoon sessions 3 days a week, variety of basically social therapeutic things. Armchair yoga, music appreciation, art, crafts, coffee, whatever. Just basically excuses for social interaction. Of course, that was impossible during lockdown. So we did Zoom, which was okay. It was 100% better than nothing, but it was a very limited value. And actually, the people that probably needed it most were the people that probably could use it least. So the people that were sickest, that were perhaps oldest, that were certainly more isolated. It's okay speaking to somebody that has an illness when they're in their 40s and they have teenage children that can set up the computer. But when you're dealing with somebody that's in their 80s and lives alone and doesn't have a smartphone, let alone a computer, Zoom's no good for them. It doesn't work. And what I noticed is, and this is a bit of a sort of brutal truth, I suppose, there's a really rapid and marked, obvious deterioration in the patients or visitors, whatever we call them. We're not clinical, but they did deteriorate. They obviously, visibly deteriorated from the. I'm not saying from lack of interaction with me, but lack of interaction with others, with their peers. getting out of the house, looking at four walls, having to put on something vaguely smart to wear so that you were respectable, having a shower, washing your hair, uh, you know, that kind of thing, organizing the bus, all the kind of practical stuff that keeps your brain vaguely ticking over. Uh, when you were in lockdown, people didn't have to do that, and then they didn't do that, and then whilst it was a kind of holiday for a couple of weeks, do you know what I mean? It was sort of exciting. Oh, I can lay in bed all day. Actually, after a couple of weeks, you think, do you really? It's not really that great, is it? This just laying in bed all day without any interaction. Uh, so yeah, it was a real struggle. So we really pushed to open up again as early as we were able to open up again. So as soon as we could, we had patients back with sort of social distancing masks, all the windows open to air at the room and things like that. So we were desperate to get them back, and that's and now they are back, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Do you find like the numbers? They're back to what they were pre-pandemic.
Only just now, for
Wow.
quite a while, and we've been open for a bit now. After the pandemic, they were not. There was a real drop off, and I don't know whether it was because some of the patients had obviously died, and some of them, I don't know, were iller, didn't want to come in. There was a sort of nervousness about it, perhaps, as well, or a change in routine that they'd got used to. So it wasn't great for them, but they were used to it.
Yeah.
But now we're getting there, so we are busy again, which is good. I mean, I'd rather not be busy. I'd rather people had marvelous lives elsewhere that they didn't have to come here, but that's unrealistic. So no, it is good that we're certainly busy again.
That's good, absolutely. And you were mentioning at some point that the demographics of the people who come to the daycare is
Yeah.
not as varied as you would expect because of the area you're in.
Yeah, no, that's just my personal kind of political correctness bugbear
Observation.
thing. Yeah, I just
Mm,
noticed that uh, we're sort of between. I don't know whether you know South London. We're sort of near Morden, basically, the bottom of the
yes.
Northern Line. It's suburban sprawl, basically, but with quite big local authority or housing association bits and large areas, particularly in Merton, but also in Sutton, which we cover, of very diverse ethnic backgrounds, which isn't reflected in those people that attend the hospice. And to be brutally honest, I don't know why. I don't know what the answer is, but I
Mm,
have noticed the question, if you see what I mean. And I've sort of speculated as to whether it's the support networks that exist within families, and then I'm in danger of becoming kind of racist myself by making assumptions that Asian people live in big families with support from grandparents. Maybe that's right. I don't know, but what I have noticed is that we have a phenomenally large Asian community, but a tiny Asian group that come here. Uh, it may be that the hospice was originally run by nuns. I mean, for a long time ago. It's called St. Raphael's. It was a Catholic
yes.
institution. It's absolutely not now. It's open to absolutely anybody. But I don't know, if you're a Muslim, maybe would you want to go somewhere called St. Raphael's?
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's
just a thought.
true.
Just a
So
thought.
is there something that is talked about like within the hospice, like not
It's.
rebranding, but like would the name change
I
be
don't think they'll
on the
ever change
table?
the name. I
No.
don't think they'll ever change the name because it's historic. But what we can do and are doing with limited success, increasing success, is is clarifying for everyone that it is open to everyone. So
Yes.
and I've been trying, and again maybe it's post COVID or because of COVID, but I've been trying to reach out to local mosques, synagogues, Buddhist temples, Hindu temples, everybody and their dog that will listen to me, I will go and talk to them about it. And the first thing that I will do is explain that it's entirely non-denominational. If you've got a Sutton or a Merton GP, you can come. Full stop. But it does tend to be old white people at the moment, which is
Okay.
fine because they're fun, but they're not representative of the community.
Yeah, but it's so good of you. You go personally, like you do door to door to just spread the
Yeah,
word
yeah, I
about
will. Yeah,
us.
yeah, I will go and talk at dementia units and church coffee mornings and bingo
And,
groups and
and do you
whatever.
find it's
Yeah,
all very well received and people sort of didn't know about you, or most of
yeah.
them
No, what?
is just
Yeah, no. What I find, and it's not. I don't think it's rocket science. Is when they hear the word hospice, they're scared because they think
uh,
that's for people that are dying. I'm not dying yet. So I have to spend hours explaining that we are in the wellbeing centre, which is attached to the hospice but geographically separate from it, and the services that we offer aren't there for people that have end of life conditions, but not just for people. The phrase that we use, which I don't understand, is we call it life limiting. So if you have a life limiting condition, you're entitled to use the services free of charge. Life limiting can mean duration of life. So your life will be shorter because of your condition. I think it also means if your ability to enjoy and participate in life is limited by your condition, then that's also life limiting.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of patients, not a lot, a few patients that have degenerative conditions like motor neuron disease or muscular dystrophy, Parkinson's, those kind of conditions where they're not conventionally terminal illnesses. It might contribute to their death at some point, but they're not going to die from it in the next however long. But their lives are affected by it, and we can help with that.
And do you find that for people who use the daycare services, like I'm sure you run sort of not kind of surveys to find out what they enjoy and what they would do maybe differently, or is it you get that feedback from the people who come? And
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, with varying degrees of honesty. Like I say, the people that are very terminal are directly honest, and if you say, "Did you enjoy that?" No. Oh, great. Okay.
again, no bullshit. Like why?
Exactly. I took some people to the theatre last week, some of our patients, to see Chekhov, which was a mistake, actually. It's really fabulous play and amazing cast and very well done, and the tickets were free, all marvellous. But Chekhov's kind of miserable. And when we came out, I said, "Did you enjoy that?" I said, "Oh God, no, it was really miserable." And I thought, and I like that. I think there's none of that kind of fake politeness.
Yes.
I mean, they were grateful, expressed lots of gratitude and everything about it, but equally, they're not pretending they enjoyed it.
Yeah. So you have to find something a little bit more like maybe musical next time.
Well, yeah. The criteria, of course, were who will give us the free tickets. That's what we decided on. And the Chekhov people were marvelous, and they gave us lots of free tickets. So we're very, very grateful. But next time, something involving singing would be great. Yeah.
And I think what's very important with all those activities is just not forgetting that these people were young at some point. Maybe they were bloody wild, and we don't even know about it. And it's not reducing them to what might be seen, today, which might be maybe reduced mobility, maybe all the things that might come perhaps with old age. But I think it's so good to re-empower people. If they reminisce about their youth, they might have done the most crazy and interesting things.
I think we forget that people that were kind of teenagers in the 60s are now elderly. Do you know what I mean? They're not we're not talking about people in the 1940s where they had rationing and this, that, and the other. These are people in the 60s that were out drinking, doing drugs, wearing miniskirts, going to Rolling Stones concerts,
having psychedelic experiences.
Exactly, they're not. They're kind of cool people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that seen it, done it, whatever. So yeah, I love that. The music group that we have, which is actually this afternoon on a Tuesday, on paper sounds really dull because we literally just watch YouTube videos on request. So we have a theme. Today's theme is family or something. So what songs do you want to hear about family? And we will play one song and then talk for about 45 minutes.
Great.
About, that song was what Auntie Hilda used to play down in the shop at such and such a place. And that's why we have the session. It's not, so we can listen to somebody play marvelously on a cello, although that's fun too. It's actually about every session we have is a kind of orchestrated social event. It's about getting folk to talk to each other. Yeah. I think. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
I've only been doing it 18 months.
And you can see people really light up when they talk about, something that they did and brought them joy, or, you see them light up. And it's just like all these good endorphins and that stuff. And it's just, it's so important to just remember that these people have something valuable to share, their experiences, because I think when you feel not needed anymore, it's just, you're just wondering why you're hanging around.
Yeah, and it's particularly in a hospice setting where people have been told that they're dying, and so they think they're dying. I mean, they are dying, but they're also, the woman that set up hospices, whose name I always forget, it wasn't that long ago, she says you're living until you're dead.
Yes.
So until you actually die, you're alive. So you've got living to do. it might not be that you're running the Great North Run or whatever. It might just be that you're sitting in a wheelchair listening to, YouTube videos of Vera Lynn. Still living. It's still a laugh.
And it's true, yeah. Until you're dead, you just try and find those little joys in the everyday life. Would it be the food you eat, or new interactions, and because there's no pretense, you're going to meet people who are on the same level. It's just going to
Yeah,
be very
yeah, yeah, yeah.
direct, and you can build relationships that are very meaningful very quickly. So
Yeah, no, the conversations that people have will be 80% mundane, as all of our conversations have, and 20% terrifyingly profound, really, really sort of significant about, the meaning of life and death and pain and loss and loneliness and agony and bereavement. And then they'll be back onto when are they going to start that
the
bus
weather
service
and
in
yeah.
Sutton again?
I mean, it's good, right? I think it's good to discuss this within the same conversation. I
Yeah,
love it because that's how life is, eh? The profound and the
it is. It's
mundane.
real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you tell us very quickly a little bit about your projects that you were talking about, like Neighbours? You said it's called.
Yes, we're starting at the moment. I work in the centre, in the wellbeing centre, which is a lovely kind of modern building next door to the hospice. But you have to be able to get here. We don't do volunteer transport. You have to get here on the bus, in a car, driving, lift, whatever. There's lots and lots of people in the community that are really isolated, not just lonely because they live by themselves, but they can get out, but lonely they live by themselves and they can't get out. So the plan is, and it's a broader thing across London, actually, it's called Compassionate Neighbours. I think it was started by a hospice in Hackney, actually, near you, St Joseph's. They sort of devised the model, can I put it like that? And it's a very simple model, actually. So, all credit to them, which is basically identifying people that are isolated, identifying volunteers that are prepared to go visit them and matching them together. And lightly sort of directing it and supervising it, but they're adults meeting adults, so we're not, there's some kind of safeguarding issues, but not much. And it's about maintaining that sort of social interaction. And we always try and one of the words that they use endlessly, which is tiresome but true, is empower. We like to empower people. So people lose confidence when they're stuck indoors by themselves. So we say, right, we're going to the shops, we're going to go and get a cup of coffee. And after the third week, you find that they've gone out by themselves that week actually and got a cup of coffee. So it's that kind of, empowering them, giving them the confidence to sort of do things like that, which is, easy, but kind of important.
Sometimes you just need someone literally to hold your hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a tiny bit of sort of very light nagging, in the form of encouragement. Oh, come on, let's just go out. I'm sick of this. Do we really have to watch Countdown again? Why don't we go to, Costa Coffee? And they might be polite to you and say, oh, come on, let's do it then. And you go, and then they have a better time. So we're trying to do that. It's not difficulty. The hurdles are identifying and obtaining enough volunteers in the area. And the obvious problem is always identifying the isolated elderly. Do you see what I mean?
Because they're isolated, so yeah.
By definition, isolated. There isn't a list there. So we work closely with GPs and with local mental health charities, Age UK, people like that, who also provide similar services. This isn't, a replacement for. This is just another addition. Yeah. And with the kind of charities associated with specific illnesses like the Merton Association, just to identify and get hold of these people. And then I will go and visit them and I will bully them into agreeing to have a volunteer visit them. Because they'll all be, oh, no, it's fine.
And say yes, because you're so lovely.
Yeah, and then I get it, and then it works, So that's the plan.
So how is it financed, Compassionate Neighbours?
It's charitable, basically, so fundraising, essentially. Now, some of it with the hospice, hospices are also charities, but they get money from the NHS for the patients that they treat. So it's a kind of weird, kind of intermediate thing. But the Compassionate Neighbours is entirely charitable funded, so fundraisers, bequests, donations, that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's not actually an expensive service. The only expense is, I suppose, my salary, which is tiny.
I want to cry every time you say this.
The volunteers, are obviously volunteers. They don't get paid. So it's actually it's quite an efficient service in that sense. It's not one of these things where you're spending thousands to do a little bit of good. You're spending not very much to do a little bit of good. So, yeah.
It's so significant, and the resources needed are so little.
Yeah.
How do you match people, by the way? How do you pair people up?
Do you know what? It's kind of, we have these questionnaires that people fill in, I'm interested in current affairs and knitting or whatever, that kind of stuff. But actually, I meet them and I form a view, and I just think, no, you're quite quiet, so you'd like this person, or you're quite loud, so you'd like this person, you're old-fashioned or conservative, so you'd like this person, you're a bit modern, that kind of, it's literally, well, partly actually it's who's available. I mean, you might get what you're given. But if there is it's mostly kind of identifying personalities and thinking they'll click. And actually, if they don't, that's okay. You don't meet people in the pub every night and think you're my best friend for life. If it doesn't work, we just change it. There's no stigma in terms of, it doesn't have to go on forever. Yeah, so that's the kind of soft skill, I suppose, involved.
There was a really nice initiative I saw. I mean, I didn't read the details, but it was so nice. And they do that a little bit in Hackney as well. It's kind of having little ones. I mean, more or less little. They could be toddlers, or they can be like primary school age, like visiting. Also, like elderly in whatever context they might be, like sufficiently well to be able to sit and maybe have a little conversation, but they don't need to be mentally very mobile at all. And it seemed to be really well received, that the elderly really, it's like having pets, pets and children, they lift you up.
It's true. I think I watched a documentary about something similar I think it was in the Netherlands, and they'd built a care home, and then they built a nursery next door, and they'd have their lunch together, and it was carnage on both sides, I'd imagine. But equally, they're all having a laugh, and the kids are messing about, and it's a bit like having grandparents. Grandparents are nicer to kids, to their grandchildren, than parents are to their kids as a rule. Because you spoil them, You don't have the responsibility of making sure that they turn out all right, so you can give them that kind of pop and then send them home. Yeah.
So maybe something in the future.
Well, yeah. Well, we always get there's a Catholic primary school next door that comes in 2 or 3 times a year and punishes us with Christmas carols and things. So, and actually the guests love that. They really love it. It works really well for that reason that we've just explained, because everyone's slightly misbehaving in a good way. Yeah.
Simon, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
It's always lovely to talk to you, Flo. Yeah, always lovely.
To find out more about St. Raphael's Hospice, head to their website straphaels.org.uk or to Instagram st.rafs. And of course, as always, these addresses will be in the caption of this podcast. Bye for now, have a good day, and thank you for listening.